My name's Hank, and I've lived in the same sleepy cul-de-sac in northern Arizona for over 30 years. Out here, the sunsets burn orange behind the buttes, and folks used to wave to each other from the porch. We knew each other's dogs by name and could borrow a ladder without signing a waiver. But that all changed when the HOA got a new president, Karen Witherspoon. She strutted in with a clipboard, a Bluetooth headset, and a God complex big enough to pave over the desert. Now, I'm not one to stir the pot. I did my years as a lineman, raised 2 girls with my late wife, and all I want now is peace. But when someone threatens my family, that's when the old boots come back on. It all started with a letter. Not a friendly one of those typed-out, passive-aggressive HOA violations that's colder than a rattlesnake's stare. It said I had 72 hours to remove my American flagpole from the front yard because it was a non-compliant structure. Never mind that flag had flown there since '96, through rain, war, and the worst drought in Arizona history. I called up Karen, asked her politely what the issue was. She said, "Mr. Carson, the HOA has aesthetic standards. That pole isn't approved." Her voice was all sugar-coated spite. I told her she could come pull it out herself if she felt that strongly. She didn't like that. What came next wasn't just petty, it was dangerous. 3 days later, my daughter Caroline came to visit. She's 38, sharp as a tack, and walks with the kind of confidence that makes people step aside. See, Caroline isn't just my girl. She's also a tactical commander with the FBI. She doesn't broadcast it, but years in counter-terrorism and hostage rescue have hardened her. She's seen things no father wants his daughter to see. But to Karen, Caroline was just a woman in jeans and a flannel shirt pulling into my driveway in a black Chevy Suburban. I was in the backyard trimming mesquite when I heard the commotion out front. Raised voices, a man yelling, then, what I'll never forget, Caroline's voice, calm but fierce. "Put the weapon down. You're making a mistake." I dropped the clippers and bolted. By the time I got around the house, the sight nearly stopped my heart. One of the HOA's so-called security patrol, a pudgy guy in his 20s, wearing camo cargo pants and a vest labeled HOA enforcement, had a sidearm drawn, pointed straight at my daughter. Caroline had her hands raised, but not in fear, in control. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm identifying myself as federal law enforcement. You're aiming a weapon at a tactical officer. Step back." The kid's hand trembled. His name tag read B. Haskins. His eyes were wide, clearly didn't expect a response like that. I was halfway across the lawn when he muttered, "I thought she was breaking in." "To my own father's home?" Caroline snapped. "I unlocked the front door with a key. Did you even call dispatch before drawing that weapon?" Haskins glanced toward the street, where a golf cart with the HOA seal sat idling. And who else was standing there, arms crossed, lips pursed, watching it all unfold? Karen Witherspoon. She didn't intervene. She didn't stop it. She just watched, like she wanted this. I stepped between them, chest heaving. "Put the gun away before you ruin your life, son." Haskins hesitated, then holstered it. Poor kid didn't know what kind of fire he'd just poured gasoline on. Caroline pulled out her badge and ID, flashed it in his face like a slap. "You just committed a federal offense by pointing a weapon at a tactical agent. I could have you in custody in 15 minutes. Karen finally walked over, arms swinging like she was strolling through a mall. Now, let's not escalate things." Caroline turned slow. "You escalated it when you sent an armed, untrained volunteer to harass a federal officer in her father's driveway." Karen blinked. "We've had break-ins. He was just doing his job." "Your HOA doesn't have the authority to arm patrolmen," Caroline said. "That's impersonation of law enforcement and reckless endangerment." Karen's smile cracked. "We're a private community. We have bylaws." "Your bylaws don't override federal jurisdiction," Caroline snapped. I stepped in again. "Karen, you've gone too far. This isn't about flagpoles or aesthetic compliance. This is personal." Karen's voice got icy. "If you feel threatened, Mr. Carson, you're welcome to take it up with the board." That was the last straw for me. That night, we sat around my old oak kitchen table, me, Caroline, and my neighbor Jim, who used to be county sheriff before he retired. Caroline sipped black coffee and laid out her plan. "I'm not just filing a complaint," she said. "I'm opening a federal investigation." Jim whistled low. Karen stirred a hornet's nest now. Caroline nodded. "There's more. I did a little digging on the HOA's filings. Their security force isn't insured. That gun wasn't registered under any corporate entity. And the HOA has been collecting extra dues for neighborhood protection services for years." My jaw clenched. "You mean they're running a fake police force and charging us for it?" "Exactly," Caroline said. "It's wire fraud, impersonation, and misuse of community funds. And if we can prove Karen authorized that weapon, she's going to wish she only got a citation for harassment." I couldn't sleep that night. I just kept picturing that kid pointing a gun at my daughter, on my land. I thought about my wife, God rest her soul, and how she would have been out there swinging a shovel at that punk's head. The next morning, things got weirder. An official-looking envelope was shoved under my door. Inside was a notice of pending HOA disciplinary action. They claimed I intimidated an HOA officer and violated community peace. Caroline read it and laughed. "They're trying to cover their tracks. If we take this public, they'll claim you started it." I wasn't laughing. I knew the old folks on our street. The Watsons, the Fergusons, Old Man Lou. They weren't going to know who to believe. Karen was good at painting herself as the victim. So Caroline did something brilliant. She requested the HOA board meeting minutes. Legally, they're required to release them upon homeowner request. When she got them, what we found made my blood boil. 2 weeks before this all started, Karen had approved a line item in the budget, $5,000 for security training and tactical gear. The notes showed the purchase of 2 Glock pistols, body armor, and tasers, bought through a private security surplus site. No state certification, no background checks. We had her. That night, Caroline filed a federal report and called in a favor to a friend at the Bureau's field office in Phoenix. Meanwhile, I made a few quiet phone calls of my own, to neighbors I knew I could trust. I told them the truth, that the HOA was arming weekend warriors and letting them play cops on our streets. That my daughter, a federal agent, had a gun pulled on her for unlocking my own front door. The mood in our street shifted overnight, and Karen knew it. By the end of the week, Karen came knocking. I opened the door to find her standing there with a tight smile and a gift basket, some wine, a candle, and what looked like homemade brownies. "Just here to smooth things over," she chirped. "We got off on the wrong foot." Caroline stepped beside me. Karen's eyes flicked between us. "No need to get lawyers involved. Let's handle this neighbor to neighbor, Carol." Ayn folded her arms. "Too late." Karen's smile faded. "By the way," Caroline said, "you'll want to let your board know that federal investigators will be requesting all your budget documentation within 48 hours. Karen turned pale. "You wouldn't—" "I already did." Then came the clincher. Jim walked up behind us with a folder. "I just got the deed records," he said. "Karen, did you know the land your HOA office sits on isn't actually zoned for community business use? Matter of fact, it technically belongs to the original ranch trust, which Hank here inherited last year." Karen looked like someone had just kicked her in the stomach. "That little shed of yours," Jim added, "could be condemned by Monday." Karen stumbled back, mumbling something about calling her lawyer. And that's when we realized she wasn't just beat, she was scared. But what happened next? That came out of left field. We weren't prepared for the lengths Karen would go to keep control, and we sure didn't expect who she'd try to take down with her. Because 2 days later, the FBI arrived. Not to talk to Karen, but to arrest my daughter. I'll never forget the look on Caroline's face when they knocked. It was 6:42 a.m., sun just barely crawling up over the hills, when 3 unmarked black SUVs rolled up in front of my house. Out stepped two agents from Internal Affairs and a federal marshal. They had serious eyes, tight lips, and a sealed warrant in hand. "Caroline Carson," one of them said, "you're under investigation for impersonating an officer and obstruction of a community investigation." I stood there stunned. "What the hell are you talking about? She is an officer." Caroline, calm as ever, raised her hands. "This is retaliation. I want to see the warrant." And sure enough, the paperwork was riddled with Karen's fingerprints. A formal complaint had been filed by the HOA board, claiming that Caroline had flashed a fake badge, threatened community volunteers, and used coercive language to impersonate a federal agent. It was laughable, but it was official. They didn't cuff her, thank God, but they did take her downtown for questioning. As they pulled away, I saw Karen standing at the corner of the cul-de-sac, robe on, coffee mug in hand, watching smugly like a movie villain. I saw her mouth the words, "Told you." But that smug look didn't last long. Within hours, the tide turned. Jim and I got on the horn fast. Caroline's friends in the bureau weren't just feds, they were high level. She'd trained field teams, led critical ops, and worked cases so sensitive even I didn't know about them. When word got to her commanding officer, things snapped into place. Turns out, Karen's complaint had gone through a friend she had at the local magistrate's office. A retired board member from another HOA, now working part-time as a clerk, had fast-tracked the warrant using half-baked statements and falsified records. By noon, the Internal Affairs team realized they'd made a mistake. By 3 p.m., they apologized. By 5 p.m., the case was dismissed, and Karen's real problems began. Caroline came home with fire in her eyes. She wanted a war, let's give her one. She wasn't angry. She was focused, tactical. That's when I saw the side of my daughter I'd only heard about from her old unit commander, that cool, relentless FBI grit. Caroline filed a federal motion to open a full investigation into HOA corruption, misuse of community funds, and impersonation of law enforcement. She submitted the audio recording she'd made on her phone. Yes, she'd captured the entire armed confrontation with Haskins and her discussion with Karen at the doorstep, and as icing on the cake, Jim filed an official complaint to the county zoning board about the illegal HOA office. It was a 1-2 punch Karen never saw coming. Neighbors started talking, whispering turned to full-blown outrage. The Fergusons, Karen's longtime allies, found out that over $20,000 had gone missing from the HOA's emergency reserve fund. Turns out Karen had approved a landscaping company that didn't exist. The checks, signed by her and deposited in an account under her cousin's name. She'd been embezzling from the community for years. The next HOA meeting, it was standing room only. Caroline and I walked in together. Me in my old boots, her in a blazer with her badge clipped to her belt. Every head turned. Karen stood at the podium, visibly sweating, trying to maintain order. "Let's begin the meeting with community updates." "Point of order," Jim interrupted. "We move to suspend the current board and vote for emergency oversight pending investigation." Someone from the back shouted, "Seconded." Karen tried to regain control. "You can't just override due process." Caroline stepped forward. "Actually, you can, when the board is under federal investigation." The room erupted. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak out before started shouting their own experiences. One woman tearfully admitted she'd been fined $500 for putting a "Help Wanted" sign in her window. Another man said Karen's security patrol had followed his teenage son home from school because he wore a hoodie. Karen looked like she might faint. The vote passed in minutes. Karen and her board were suspended. Caroline didn't even need to press charges. The community did it for her. But here's where poetic justice really kicked in. Remember that armed security kid, Haskins? Turns out he was just a local college dropout trying to make a few bucks. When the feds questioned him, he flipped like a pancake, told them Karen had pressured him to carry a weapon. that she told him Caroline was probably a thief, and to stand his ground, that she personally handed him the pistol, unlicensed and unregistered. That sealed it. Karen was arrested 2 weeks later on multiple charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, impersonating a law enforcement officer through proxy, reckless endangerment, and embezzlement. Her bail was denied. The same street where she once walked around barking orders was now lined with people cheering as the cruiser took her away. As for the HOA, Caroline helped the neighborhood reorganize under a new interim committee, one that doesn't allow armed patrols or weaponized nonsense. I even got asked to join the oversight board, but I said no thanks. I've had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. Caroline, she's back to work. But now, every time she visits, neighbors wave. They bring over pies. One of them even crocheted a little FBI badge on a throw pillow as a gift. Sometimes at night, I sit out on the porch and stare at that old flagpole, the one Karen tried so hard to remove. It's still standing. Sunlight hits it just right, like God himself saying, "You held your ground." We didn't just win, we exposed them. We reminded folks that a neighborhood doesn't need a tyrant. It needs neighbors. And if there's a lesson in all this, it's that real power isn't in a title, a badge, or a clipboard. Real power is in doing what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's personal. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around. I've got more wild HOA tales coming your way.